Welcome to Profit Boss Radio, where successful women have paved the road to their own financial freedom. Each week, your host, Hillary Hendershot, financial coach, money mindset expert, and experienced wealth manager, will help you discover the keys to the wealth and peace of mind you want and deserve in her no-nonsense and authentic style. Starting right now.
Welcome to Profit Boss Radio, episode 47. One of the most important principles in investing is that you never risk what you can't afford to lose. So once you've built up an asset, you protect it. And that principle holds true in life and in business. Today's guest is an internet business lawyer, and she's the creator of CoverYourAssetsOnline.com, Lin Eleoff. If you have a business and a blog or even just a website, then this episode is for you. You know, I know that getting your ducks in a row from a legal perspective can feel about as exciting as buying life insurance. But in both of those cases, when you need those protections to have been put in place, you really need them. Don't put yourself at risk by thinking short-sightedly, and enjoy this episode of Profit Boss Radio. You can find the gifts Lin mentions in this episode and her free legal toolkit at hillaryhendershot.com/47. Lin Eleoff, welcome to Profit Boss Radio.
Hillary, thank you for having me.
How did you get your start being an internet business lawyer?
Oh my goodness. So I first knew what kind of lawyer I didn't want to be. And that was the kind of lawyer that sits in a fancy schmancy law firm, over, with the corner office looking out at her, this beautiful, magnificent view, then turns around and looks at all the work on her desk and goes, ugh. So
you actually wanted a life?
I wanted a life, exactly that. I wanted a full life, and I didn't want to work 9 to 5. I didn't want to have a boss. I didn't want any of that. Of course, I did work in a firm, in small firms, for women who were starting their own firms, and that was a whole eye-opener, and that really solidified the fact that I didn't want to be working for people. It was a grind. So I found a woman who was a life coach and a lawyer. Then she ended up coaching me, and then I became a life coach. Then I became a life coach businesswoman who, as a lawyer, realized there was all this information out there for online entrepreneurs, and they didn't know what they didn't know. All the legal aspects, it was like, what legal, what privacy, why do I need documents? What are you talking about? And I thought, oh my goodness, there's a big gaping hole here. And so I stepped into that. And I absolutely love it because I'm working with people like me, women like me who are starting their own businesses and who really are into it. Like they love it. They love working from home. They love creating things. And so that's how I became a life coach who happens to be a lawyer, or maybe the other way around, and an online business owner.
So you were a lawyer and then a life coach?
Yes.
And forgive me for asking, but when you made that change, did your income plummet, or how did that go?
My income at that point, so I first of all, I went to law school after I had my fourth child. So I wasn't working like 80 hours a week and making that. My money was made before I became a lawyer in an entirely different career. I was in television news in Toronto. Then we moved to the United States. That's when I went to law school. And I would have to say that I never made a lot of money as a lawyer who worked in a law firm.
Really?
First of all, I didn't put that kind of hours in. And, my priority was to be home with my kids then. I mean, I had 4 of them. I sort of had to look after them. I didn't feel good about leaving them. So this is when this whole thing evolved. It's like, well, how do I use all these things that I know and that I'm good at and make it fit into something that works for me? And I have to tell you, Hillary, it was like, wait, a life coach, a lawyer? I mean, I couldn't even say those words in the same sentence at first because it just sounded cheesy and hokey and all of that stuff. And then I gave myself a slap upside the head and said, I get to define this. I get to be whoever I want to be. If it makes sense to me, then I'm going to do it. And, so I'm sure there were snickers I was too busy with my business and growing my business to really pay attention. So that's kind of how it evolved.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, life coaches are everything from broke to Tony Robbins, right? I mean,
right.
everybody needs a life coach. It's just about how you build that business. And it sounds like you found a great niche for yourself.
Yes.
And so I'm going to start by telling a little story. I hired a woman to do my very first blog. It's not on the internet anymore. And I obviously won't say her name. She terminated our contract. She built the website and then she terminated our contract because I wanted more service than she wanted to provide. And by the by, I found out that she had built my blog on her platform. So I didn't have it. I couldn't keep it, right? It was gone. When she terminated our contract, it was gone. And so I wrote her what I refer to affectionately as a nasty gram. Well, she sicked a lawyer on me. I got a letter from a lawyer who scared the bejesus out of me.
Oh.
And since then, I tell my team, I am deeply, deathly afraid of lawyers. And I learned that you don't have freedom of speech when it comes to commerce, that if you say things that aren't true, that cost people business, you can actually be sued for that. And needless to say, I put my tail between my legs, apologized, wrote back to the lawyer, luckily never heard back. I think it was a shot across the bow, but it has altered my behavior professionally since then. And it's probably been 6 years since then. So I think this is really important for people to understand that it doesn't matter. Here's the thing. People say, well, I'm not going to get sued. I haven't done anything wrong, right? So it doesn't matter if I get sued. But
right. It'll never happen to me. Famous last words. I hear it all the time.
I know, but even if you don't do something wrong, it's the getting sued that costs you the money because it costs, $30,000 to hire a lawyer.
Right.
Right. So, yes. So I kind of dropped us in the middle of the conversation, but what does it actually mean when people say you've been served?
Well, it means that someone is suing you. Someone is going after you for whatever it is, damages, money damages. They're accusing you of having done something that has caused them some sort of harm, and it could be anything. And they're going after you for, to make them whole again, to fix whatever you broke. And of course,
go ahead.
People can make all kinds of claims. They can make all kinds of claims. And so that's why, had I known you at the time you received that letter, I would have said, okay, deep breath. Let's take a look here because clearly you have a claim. Someone just took your stuff and then shut you down basically. And that's not cool. So it wasn't a completely one-sided thing that you did. She did something first. And so that's why I tell people when you get a letter, and a lot of people are getting letters saying you're being sued for this amount of thousands of dollars because for the unauthorized use of one of our images, and people panic and pay. And I'm like, no, don't pay right away. Let's investigate a little bit. Let's see who actually owns this, if this is for real, or if this is just somebody scamming you to get you money, because those people are out there. The internet is crazy. It's the wild, wild west, and the law is struggling to keep up with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So and I did that a couple times too. When I first had the blog, I think I scraped images from some other website, like just pictures I liked or something, and put them up. I had no idea that was not cool. Luckily, I read that it was definitely not cool and took everything down. And now I pay for my images. They're like $1 or $2 each. But I've definitely read posts from people who that very activity has cost them $20,000 to $25,000.
Oh, yes. It can be crazy. Yes. Right. So don't take images off the internet. Just because it's on Google doesn't mean it's free. And just because it says royalty free doesn't mean it's free. It just means you don't have to pay fees over and over again. You just pay a one-time fee. So yeah, the safest thing is to either pay for the images or get what's called a Creative Commons Zero license, which you will find there are websites who provide free, like really free images that with license to let you use them however you want. So look for that Creative Commons Zero license and then check the license and read it.
So what are the things, let's say, I have a couple of ways to ask questions here. Let's say someone's going out into business and let's just say she's going to be a life coach. What are the kind of bread and butter basics that she needs to take care of in terms of covering her assets online?
Okay, so what I mean by covering your assets, you have personal assets and you have business assets. So of course we want to protect your business, but we also want to protect your personal assets. If you go into business and you are a sole proprietor, you are the business. The business is you. There is no difference. There's nothing separating your business from your personal assets. It's all kind of commingled. And that's dangerous because if someone does come after your business, they're also coming after you, and everything then is put at risk. So there are things that you can put in place to protect your personal assets and separate it from the business, but you want to make sure you do that. And eventually you want to get an LLC or an S Corp. So that's the part about covering your assets, business and personal. When you have a website, once you're online, and that's what I help people with, businesses that are online, the first thing you want to do is put up 3 documents on your website. The first one is a privacy policy. That protects people that come to your website. That is required by law. You have to protect personally identifiable information. And as soon as you collect someone's email, then that is personally identifiable information, and you have to let them know what you're going to do with it, how you're going to store it, if you're going to share it with anyone else, and what they can do if they ever want to take it back. So that's the privacy policy. Then you want a disclaimer. This protects you. This limits your liability. It tells people, hey, I've got this information here for you. Read it, use it. I hope it helps you. But if you misuse it or you don't use it the right way, I'm not responsible. You're responsible. So you can see how that is limiting your liability. Mm-hmm. Then the third document is a terms of use, also known as a terms and conditions. And that lays out the rules for anyone who comes to your website. I think of it as your playground. And if it's your playground, your rules, and you want to make those rules, you want to tell people what they can and cannot do on your website. You want to tell them that the content is yours and therefore copyrighted, that there are trademarks in place that they cannot infringe, that they can't share your information without permission. So all these rules are in place so that people don't have the excuse, well, I didn't know, and can use that as a defense should you ever decide to go after them. So those are the basics. And if you're a life coach, then you must have a client services agreement. You need to have everything in writing. I would say, like what you did, Hillary, with the person that was building your website, you want to have that in writing. You want to make it clear. And another thing, to your point about what happened to you, you don't want a web developer buying your domain name for you with their credit card on their account, because that means they own that domain name. And this happened to a fellow coach who had someone create a website for her. He bought the domain name for her. She didn't know any differently. And there was a dispute, and he took the whole thing, including the website and the domain name, and she couldn't use hername.com because he owned it. So make sure that you open the web host account, you buy the domain name, and you make sure you have access to the site on which the developer is creating your content.
Thank goodness I finally figured that piece out. I remember that whole process of buying a domain name and registering it and getting web hosting service. I was like, what? Wait, can someone explain this to me in English, please? I don't understand what's happening. And I didn't do it effectively. Now I buy domains all the time, but it was bizarre, like learning a new language for me. Because I couldn't conceptualize what was happening. So just go to GoDaddy yourself. There are lots of places you can buy domains, but I usually go to GoDaddy and make sure you pay for your own domain.
Yes, right.
And so those are the 3 bread and butter things that people need when they put up a website. What are the terrible things that can happen if they don't?
So you have to protect people's privacy. So, the FTC could come down on you if somebody complains that you have, handed their website, or rather their email information, or shared their personal information with a third party. If you haven't sort of explained the rules of your site, then somebody can come after you and said, hey, I did that thing that you said for me to do in that blog post you wrote, and it backfired. And now I have permanent damage in my baby finger or whatever, right?
Yeah, being in financial services, that's my worst nightmare.
Right, exactly. So that's where you want to really button everything up to make it clear that you are not working for them. They haven't hired you. There's no exchange. There's no agreement. You're just giving information and everything is on them. Now, anybody can sue you. It's what you can prove in court. But you want to reduce the risk of being sued because, as you mentioned, lawsuits are a nightmare and expensive, and they're so stressful. They really can bring you down, even when you win. So if you've got everything in place, you reduce the chance of that happening. And then from there, you can negotiate or talk to people and be fair and be reasonable, and hopefully they'll be the same. But, there are no guarantees.
Okay, great. So let's talk about trademarks. First of all, what's the difference between trademark and copyright?
Okay, that's a really good question and something that people get mixed up all the time. But a copyright protects content, your original work of authorship. Mm-hmm. So it is automatically formed when you write a book, write a blog post, write a song, create something that you're able to fix in a tangible form. That's kind of the copyright law language. So it's your images, it's your product content, that sort of thing. The trademark is the name of your business. That can be trademarked. Your product names, your slogans, your logos, and sort of design elements that you fix and put into your website so that it identifies you, your company, and your brand. That's what a trademark is. It tells people when they see certain things or read certain words or the name of your company, that's that company. Like 3 Stripes, that's Adidas. The swoosh, that's Nike. So those examples are very clear, right? But you want to have a trademark that is distinguishable from another company, and it cannot be confusingly similar. If there's a likelihood of confusion, then you cannot hold the copyright, or rather the trademark.
Okay, so now, for example, I would trademark, in my case, Hillary Hendershot Financial, right?
You could absolutely trademark that. Although Hillary Hendershot Financial, what are the chances of other Hillary Hendershots
very slim?
Right. So, you could do that, but I would say in your case, that's probably not the best way to allocate your whatever amount you can pay in legal fees. I would say maybe you want to use that for something else.
Okay.
But if there was a chance that there was another Hillary Hendershot doing financial work, I would go for that.
So if I don't trademark it, and I'm asking for the benefit of everyone listening, if I don't trademark it, can someone then trademark my name and take it from me in a business perspective?
Trademark, like copyright, you have the trademark as soon as you start using the mark in commerce.
Right. So because I've been using it for several years, I kind of have first right of refusal?
You have first rights, but as common law rights, those rights are particular to the state in which your business is registered. So if you really want to have that security of knowing that no one in the country, we're talking about the United States now, can ever use that name or trademark, say on the East Coast, because you're on the West Coast even, then that registration gives you federal rights. And federal rights, federal trademark rights, like federal copyright rights, give you the option of suing someone in federal court. It also affects the amount that you can recover. You can recover statutory damages and you can claim attorney's fees, but it must be registered. So there are definitely benefits to having a trademark. And it would be easy for you to get Hillary Hendershot Financial. I shouldn't say easy. Of course, I haven't done any search on it, but I'm assuming that no one else has that name and that would be a pretty easy slam dunk trademark for you.
So I didn't apply for Hillary Hendershot Financial. Actually, I applied for Money Operating Systems, which is a technology around money psychology that I talk about a lot. And I first coined the phrase in my TEDx talk. And also Profit Boss. I can't remember if it was Profit Boss or Profit Boss Radio. And those are in application right now. And so one thing I learned is that while they're in application, or at any time actually, when you first start using a term that you think you'd like to get a trademark for, you can put the superscript TM after the word on your website copy like that. And then once you get it, it changes to the R, right? Registered?
That's exactly right. Okay. So anyone can use the TM right away. And that just states that you've created this is your name, and you're claiming to use it in commerce. And that gives people notice that you've already claimed it. So if somebody else came into your state in California and wanted to use that trademark, and you've already got the TM symbol on it, then you've got something up on them because you've been using it. You can see it on your website. As long as you give notice that you're staking a claim, then that gives that location, your state, notice. People in your state better not mess with you.
Yes. That's true. That's true, Lynn. People better not mess with me. Let's back up a little bit to protecting personal assets. So as a sole proprietor, is there anything you can do? I do know as a financial advisor that IRAs are protected from lawsuits. So you can be sued for all the cash in your bank, all the money in your brokerage account. But if it's in an IRA, it is protected. Is there anything else people can do while their business is in the form of sole proprietorship to protect themselves?
Absolutely. First of all, you want to set up separate bank accounts. You want to not commingle your funds. And it's so tempting when you're a sole proprietorship and you're not making a lot of money, and, your web hosting bill is due, and you just write a check from your personal account or pay from your personal PayPal account and pay that bill. Don't do it. Make it very clear. You want to show the IRS and creditors and the court that you have been meticulous in separating what's personal and what's business. So that's number one. Do not commingle funds. Open a savings and a checking account specifically for your business. The other thing that you want to do is get insurance. You want to get liability insurance. Depending on the nature of your business, you want to make sure that you're covered. Now, a lot of people say, well, and this applies to even if you have an LLC or an S Corp, a lot of people say, well, that'll protect me. Well, not really, not necessarily. Liability isn't necessarily protected. So you want to, again, based on the business that you're in, you want to get insurance. And other things that you can do are, like protecting your copyright, protecting your trademark, your intellectual property. That is all of that. And just be smart. I mean, don't be afraid to learn this legal stuff or the financial stuff, because I think that the temptation is to put our heads in the sand and say, it'll never happen to me, or can't worry about that stuff, or here's a good one, I'm too small, no one's going to notice. First of all, they're not responsible. We are grown-ass businesswomen and we're running businesses. And so let's protect what we're creating. I often say, my business is my baby. I need to protect it, and I give it a high priority.
If anyone has listened to me for any period of time, they will hear me say, if I even talk about the stock market, I say, this is not customized investment advice. I have not reviewed your situation, your risk tolerance. Do not take action based on what I'm saying today. It was not individualized for you. And I will say it 1,000,000 times because I have to. Because the federal government watches financial advisors, and I have to be careful. Right. And I don't want to, confuse people. I just behave like my don't get sued strategy. Part of it is always tell the truth and be the first to come to the table with the relevant information, right? Don't leave people in the dark, and make sure that I like to kind of discuss all the possible outcomes. Well, the happy outcome is A, but what if B, and what if C, and if D, really, we should talk about that too.
Right. Which reminds me, I am providing you with information information today. This is not legal advice. I am not your lawyer.
This is an educational podcast. You can call Lin after you listen. And then the bread and butter of the entrepreneur, the doing business, the commerce part, the part where money actually changes hands. You're a life coach. You get your first client and you need a contract. And having the contract drafted, I don't know, could it cost, the entire value of what the client paid you? I don't know. Where do you start with getting a contract, and how cheap can it be? And when does it need to get more complex? And how can we keep it simple?
So going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of our conversation, where I said, I became a lawyer and a life coach. And one of the things I realized is that I didn't want to be that lawyer, right? I didn't want to be the typical law firm lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer where people weren't afraid to talk to me, and that wasn't going to gouge people for all their money, and that was going to show people how they can do it themselves. That's really my thing. It's like empowering you to do it yourself. This is not so much of the legal legwork can be done yourself. So I created a DIY legal toolkit where people can learn all the stuff that I've been talking about. And I have templates and I have contracts that you can fill in and customize, and I show you how. So one of the things in the toolkit is a contract, a client services agreement, and it shows you, this goes here. You need to customize this. This is the boilerplate, so leave this in. It's all in there. And Hillary, honestly, for the price of what it might cost you to pay a lawyer for 1 hour, you get all this information. So I'm often asked, can you really do it yourself? Yes, you can. I am not throwing you a law school textbook. I have written it in such a way that, quite frankly, is a little entertaining. And I think knowledge is power, right? We hear that all the time. And so many of the people that have used my toolkit have said to me, oh my God, I feel so much better knowing that I've taken care of these things. I've put those documents on my website. I've got a contract. I know what I can deduct from my home office with the IRS. I understand, what's legally mine and what isn't, and precautions I have to take to protect my intellectual property. So all of those things are doable. And going back to what you originally asked me about a contract, that's in there too. It absolutely can be done. And here's the thing. If eventually you do see a lawyer, and there are instances where I tell you absolutely should see a lawyer too right off the bat, is if you're in a partnership agreement with someone, a partnership arrangement, you must see a lawyer. However, I tell you or show you all the things that you can do up front, so that when you go to the lawyer, you're simply saying, here's our agreement. We've hashed all these things out. These are the terms we've worked out. So we just want you to look it over and tell us what's missing or what maybe we need to tweak, and save yourself hundreds of dollars just by having done all that legwork yourself. Same with a contract. You can get it all written out and then take it to a lawyer and say, look this over, tell me where you might see any problems, and done.
Wow. I mean, it's so important. We enter into business dealings with the best of intentions. But one thing I've learned, even with hiring employees, is that you have to set expectations. You have to create that job responsibilities document, or in the case of what we're talking about, that contract that dictates whose responsibility is what, so that if there is a question, you can come back to the document and say, what did we agree to? What are the expectations here? And it really just sets everyone up to win.
Yeah. To that point, Hillary, I think that, and now this is where the life coach in me is probably going to start seeping out.
Free life coaching. Let's do it.
But you want to make a contract with yourself. It's like, set an intention for your business, and how are you going to show up as a boss? Because the last thing, we enter into business for ourselves. We think, oh, this is going to be great. This freedom, I can do whatever I want. And then we become the worst boss to our own employee. So we treat ourselves terribly. We work crazy hours. We flit around doing all these things and never seem to go anywhere. Instead of saying, all right, now how do I want to run my business? What are my values? How will I stay in integrity? Like that sort of conversation with yourself, I think is so important, because then from there, you can take the steps you need to take, or you can find out, right? A lot of people say, well, this is too hard, but I mean, again, we're grown-ups and we can figure it out. It's not so hard that it's impossible. So that's just, okay, life coach hat off, back to Hillary.
It's like the inimitable Marie Forleo says, everything is figure-outable.
That's right. That's right. It is.
And you have options. If people don't want to figure it out themselves, they can just hire you, right?
I do. Of course, there are people who will say, I don't want to know. I don't want to do this. I want someone to do it for me. And I have that done for you option on my website. But at least decide, what do you want to do? If you want to do it yourself, that is an option. If you want someone to do it for you, that's an option. But not doing anything, I suggest you not make that an option, right?
Great. Okay, so if you're listening and you have a website or are doing business, your homework is to make sure that you have these bases covered. And Lin, what are the ways that people can work with you?
Well, on my website, coveryourassetsonline.com, I have created an exposure quiz. And it's an easy quiz. You can just take it, answer the questions, and it lets you know how exposed you are. It basically is a checklist of things that at the very least you need to have in place for your online business. And I'm sure just about everybody is going to be able to check those things off, some of the things off, and that feels good. But you know, Hillary, I don't like to use scare tactics, but it just takes one wrong move and everything can go up in smoke. So all you have to do is take a look at this list, do all the things on it, and the more you do, the more you're protected, the more secure that you can feel knowing that you've done your part and doing as much as you can do to protect yourself.
I'm sure there are stories of complete and utter business destruction, but just from my point of view, there was a legal issue that occurred a couple years ago. My husband and I hired an attorney just for an opinion, and got a bill for $10,000. And it was like, choke. Okay, got it.
Wow. Right.
Thanks for the opinion. I mean, not to speak ill of your profession, but there are bad apples and lots of jokes about lawyers, but some of them, and I mean, they're smart and talented and educated and experienced, but they're very expensive. So take that small bite of the apple now so that you don't have to eat the watermelon later.
Oh,
I just
that's
made that metaphor up. Was that good?
That's good. Watermelons and apples. I like it. I'm going to use that.
All right. Is there anything we haven't talked about yet? And by the way, you can find everything that Lin is talking about at hillaryhendershot.com/47. Lin, anything else we didn't talk about today?
We covered a lot of bases, but if people want to know what are all the things that they can do themselves, the DIYlegaltoolkit.com just kind of gives you an outline of the things that you need to pay attention to brush up on. And heck, I mean, I hope people listen. I don't want to be the lawyer that takes your money. I just want your attention. I just want to get your attention. That's it.
Well, you have my attention and you have my intention to have all of the profit bosses make sure that their assets are covered online. So, Lin, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate you explaining all those things for my Profit Boss audience. And I hope that those members of the audience who are in need, who haven't dotted their I's and crossed their T's, definitely reach out to you.
Thank you so much, Hillary. You were great to talk to.
Thanks. Hey, Profit Boss. Yes, you. Lean in here. I've got something to tell you. Do you remember that movie Mean Girls with Lindsay, whatever her name is, and the fabulous Tina Fey? It was all about this group of in-girls, the plastics. And Lindsay Lohan plays the new girl who wants desperately to be part of the clique. You get the picture. Tina Fey was hilarious in that, by the way. Did you know she wrote it? Anyway, I want to tell you about another group on Facebook. It's nothing like the plastics. I mean, come on, we're not in high school anymore. And seriously, it's much cooler to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down, don't you think? Because as we all know, as women, it can be tough to know who to trust when it comes to getting real about money. That's why I'm so proud of all the courageous women in the Profit Boss Facebook group. It's kind of like hanging out with your best friends. You know, ladies who've earned the right to be called your friend because you're not afraid to show a little bit of vulnerability. It's like that. And by the way, we let the men join too. So if you want to be part of a group of wholehearted women and men who aren't afraid to grow and support each other, give us a visit and bring your friends. Just go to hillaryhendershot.com/Profit Boss and you'll immediately be redirected to a place where you can request admission, which we will give you willingly. I'll see you on the inside.
Thank you for listening to Profit Boss Radio, where creating success on our own terms happens every day. You're not alone in your journey to a rich life, and that's why Hillary is here to add value in each and every episode. See you next time on the podcast for women and money.